Hello, I'm Mike Bellevue. I'm the black powder editor of Guns of the Old West magazine, and today we're going to talk about reloading the 4440 cartridge with black powder on a Dillon progressive press. This is a view of the deck of Dillon's 550B progressive reloading machine. This is a machine that's indexed by hand. It's not self-indexing, which I prefer. This shows all four stations loaded and ready to go. And what we're going to do is we're going to take you through the setup of each of these stations just briefly so you'll understand what needs to be done for 4440. And before we do that, we'll give you a couple of general tips, and hopefully by the time we're done, you'll know how to set up your 550B to turn out high volumes of 4440 ammunition. The piece of gear to the left of the screen is called a tool head. And that's where the dies are going to go, and then that tool head gets loaded into the reloading machine itself, and it stays stationary while the shells rotate around underneath it. Now, Dillon does not make their own 4440 die set, so you need to buy a third-party die set, and you'll see to the right I've selected a Lee Precision 3-piece 4440 die set. And that consists of a sizing die, which also decaps, a case mouth expansion and powder die, and a seating and crimping die. But I'm not going to crimp using that die, so I'm adding to the set a Lee factory crimp die, and that's what you can see kind of positioned in front of both of those two pieces of gear. So the tool head takes 4 dies, and we're going to be using 4 dies, and we're obviously not going to need the shell holder that you can see in the die set because we're going to be using the shell plate on the machine itself. Now here is one tip that I've got for you. The main problem that you'll find in loading 4440s is buggering up the crimp area. And lots of times you'll find 4440s that will not chamber fully in a revolver. And a lot of people think you're not getting maybe the bottom 10th near the rim properly resized because that's what they're seeing that's not going in. When in point of fact, what's really not going in is the front of the cartridge where it's going into the chamber throat. And that's usually because there's a little bit of a bulge at the crimp. Sometimes you can't even see that, but it's easy to get that bulge in there. The brass is very thin. It's easy to buckle it. On original 4440s back in the 19th century, the bullets they used were .427 diameter. But these days, most manufacturers want to use the same barrels as they're using on their 44 Specials and 44 Magnums. And that means that the bullet diameter it's made for is now 429. And that's what most people are trying to reload, even 430s. And when you're pushing that into a shell that's not expanded sufficiently, lots of times you can get a buckle or even it crumples down. So what I do is I change out the expander plug and replace the 4440 plug with one for 44 Magnum or 44 Special that's made for a 429 bullet. And that'll give you a much cleaner bullet seating than if you stick with the original 427 expander plugs. Well, now it's time to set the dies up on the tool head, and we're going to start with the decapping and sizing die. Now what we want to do on this is make sure that the die body right here just barely contacts the shell holder, and that's how we'll know it's set. So I've got a shell in, it's lubricated because this is a bottleneck case, and we'll just run it up. And good, as you can see, we are right where we need to be. So that's perfect. So now the first station is set up. All right, the next station we're going to set up is both case mouth expansion, and it's going to be powder filling. It's the second station up here. In fact, we'll just zoom out a bit and show you. So I've got the Lee die mounted in here. And we're going to see if we've got it correct. And there's only one way to really check that. And that is to see if when everything is said and done, we've got a good open case mouth. So I'll flip it over to the next station and let's see. Yep,
bullet goes in, not too far, beautiful, ready to be seated. So we're good.
Now, because we're loading black powder, I like to use a drop tube. That settles the powder in the case better. It gives it a little bit of compression, just makes it burn more uniformly. And I've always used drop tubes, of course, off the press when I'm using a single stage press, but that really doesn't work on a progressive. So I got a tip from a fellow on one of the other forums who showed me a drop tube that he uses on a single stage press that I thought would work great on something like the Dillon. And what it is pretty simple. It's a 2-foot long piece of standard 1/2-inch copper plumbing pipe, and then it has a step down fitting at the bottom so that it fits into the powder die, the Lee powder die on the Dillon machine, and then it has a step up fitting so that it can accept a funnel. And you just pour your powder charge down that, it drops it 2 feet into the powder die, goes into the case, settles down beautifully, and you're good to go. Here's what the drop tube looks like mounted on the 550B. It's really not as awkward as it looks. You can very easily reach up there and get your powder in, and I found that works out just great.
All right, the next station is the bullet seating station. I'm going to do that one by using a dummy cartridge, one that I've already made up. You could use a piece of factory ammunition if you've got one already made, whatever, but take a round that you know is right. Otherwise, you're going to have to experiment, a lot of trial and error to get it just right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that up into the die set, and now I'm going to turn the die head down, turn the seating die down into the die head until I feel it just making contact with the crimp shoulder, and I'm going to stop it there. And I'm going to lock it down right here because I don't want it crimping in this die. That's how we end up with a lot of bad 4440 rounds, is by trying to roll crimp it in here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the bullet seating plunger down until it's contacting the bullet. So that tells me that I should be in good shape, and I'm going to test that by swinging this empty cartridge over here, no powder in it, but I'm going to pop a bullet on it, and I'm going to run it up, and I'm going to seat it, and then I'm going to pull it out, and I'm going to see if I like it. So we've got to remove the pin to do that. There we go. I can take this out, and as you can see, we are seated right up to where it should crimp. So I think we're pretty happy with this.
Before we set up the final station, I want to show you how I check my finished rounds. I use an old kind of junk 4440 cylinder as a case gauge, and I painted the flutes white so I know this is not a cylinder to be used on a gun. And as my rounds are finished, I drop them in the chambers of the cylinder, and if they drop in nice and clean, I know they're going to work fine in my match guns. And if they don't drop in nice and clean, if they stick a bit, then I know that's probably going to have to be a rifle round because that bolt will push it right in. And if you check your rounds like this, you won't have any surprises when you get to a match.
All right, now the final die is going to be the Lee Factory crimp die. And this has kind of a collet bushing inside, and it crimps going straight in. And the important thing is you've got to get it down so that it touches the shell plate and then goes a little bit beyond it, because as you can see, this little shelf in here, right here, that has to be compressed up by the shell plate, and that's what closes that collet down to crimp it. So first we'll do our little test dummy, and as you can see, we're down, so that's good. And now we'll run the dummy through that we just seated. Okay, as you can see, we're putting pressure on there, so that's all good. And let's take a look at that round. Now the trick to this, I'm going to wide out a little bit here. Okay, as I had showed you before, I take one of these cylinders, and I use this as my check gauge because you really can't get good check gauges for 4440. So I'm going to drop this in. Boom. If it goes in like that, you know it's not going to stick. you know that you have put a good crimp on there and it's sized perfectly, and it's going to feed in any gun you want to put it in. Boom, drops right in. Okay, so now we know that our die set is all set up for 4440, and we should be good to go for making ammo. All right, let's load up some 4440 rounds. Start off in the first station. We're going to decap on the upstroke, size it, and then on the downstroke, we're going to prime it. As you can see, now we've got a primed shell from the first station. Alright, so now I'm going to flip it around to the second station, put a new shell in the first station. Up we go to deprime it. Now I want to drop some powder as well. And this is where things get a little bit dicey as far as demonstrating this. I'm going to be using black powder, and I'm using a 2.2 cc scoop. Now, I'm going to have to pull this off of the tripod and show you how we do it. Okay, here is my setup on the Dillon. And honestly, I'm not sure how well I can get it in. But I use a drop tube. And as you can see, we're up there 2 feet with a funnel that goes all the way down right into the press. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the scoop of powder, which I'll try not to spill. Try so hard not to spill it. Okay, now if we can get up there, we'll show you the funnel. Right, and I pour the powder in, and powder goes in the funnel, travels all the way down this tube, and eventually goes through that die and makes its way down here into the shell. So let's drop the shell plate, and there you go, full of black powder. Alright, good luck. Alright, now we've got powder in, so we'll flip it to the next station. Alright, we've got another shell ready to get powder. We're going to put another shell in station 1 that's going to go up and get sized. Now I'm going to put a bullet on. Alright, on station 3. So here we go again. Up we go. I'm seating the bullet. I'm also now scooping some black powder. And you got to take my word for it because I know this won't show on the camera, but we don't want to go up and do this again. Pouring it into the drop tube, watching it go down. So now it's in the shell casing. Seating a primer in station 1, and we flip it over, and we're ready to go again. So now I've got my 4th shell on station 1, ready to put powder in again on station 2, put a bullet on station 3, and way back here on station 4, I'm ready to crimp. So up we go. Alright. And now down we come. I'll prime it, flip it over, and we've just completed our first bullet. And from now on, every time we turn the crank, we are going to be making a brand new bullet. And that's going to happen every single time.